Hello, dear students. Today we are going to learn about Dr. Booker Taliaferro Washington. Huh? Who is he? Don't you know? Yeah, he is the author of Two Sides of Life. It is a prose text prescribed for intermediate first year to teach through English classroom. Okay, is it need to know about the author? Isn't it enough just studying the text? Yeah, it may be enough to read the text, but knowing about the author will help us to comprehend the lesson more. And it also allows us to study the text from the author's side, and that helps us to apply from our perspective to learn the lesson in detail. So, for that purpose, I would like to let you know a few interesting facts related to Dr. Booker Taliaferro Washington. Okay, let us move on to know the facts of Washington. Actually, he was born into the family of a slave. He was an African American writer, we can consider. So, all of you know the system of slavery. There are many great people who fought against to destroy the system of slavery, because in the system of slavery, the white people treated the black people not as a human being, but at least not as an animal being. They were treated inhumanly. They never given a chance of freedom of living, freedom of speak, and freedom of enjoying. They were always treated in unbearable situations and conditions. Okay, but today Dr. Booker Taliaferro Washington became a very famous speaker, writer, right? So it is very important to us to know, coming from such a bad background, how he reached to that position. What were his struggles to reach that position? And that journey will help us to motivate ourselves and take our challenges into the track. So that's why I would like to bring in front of you some of interesting facts in the life of Dr. Booker Taliaferro Washington. Okay, let us move on to the track. So, his name in the beginning, or you can say his mother named him Booker Taliaferro. He was born in 1856 and passed away in 1915. He was born where? In Franklin County in Virginia. It is located in US. The sad thing is, Booker Taliaferro does not know who was his father, because he was born to an unknown white man and Jane. Jane was his mother. Okay, she was an enslaved cook of James Burroughs. James Burroughs was a small planter. Okay, so you can see the life of slave people, where the mother of Booker Taliaferro was used and thrown away, and never gave him the identity of father, that is nothing but a white man. You can imagine. So I'm not going to uh, discuss with you in detail about the domination of white people on or over black people. Okay? So I already told uh, his mother Jane named him Booker Taliaferro, but later he dropped the second name Taliaferro when he joined or admitted into the school. Uh, okay, so Booker gave himself the surname Washington. This the Washington. So Booker T. Washington. So the Washington was given by himself when he first enrolled into the school. Okay, it's because you can understand. His mother was married to Washington Ferguson, okay, who was another slave who works in the form of James Burroughs, okay. Uh, Here, actually, his mother was married to Washington Ferguson after his death, after a few times of his death. So Booker Taliaferro felt himself to give his adopted father's name. So I think it was okay. So in the beginning of his life, at the age of the first 9 years, he he worked as a slave on the Burroughs farm. So along with his mother, right? So his mother worked as an enslaved cook in the same family, and his adopted father also worked in the same farm. So along with his parents, he also started working as a slave at the age of 9 years. Imagine just, okay. And in 1865, his mother took her children to Malden, which is located in West Virginia, to join her husband, who had gone there earlier and found work in the salt mines. So Mr. Washington Ferguson left from the Burroughs farmhouse, and he found a work in the salt mines and asked his wife and children to join him. So in 1865, along with her children, she went to her husband, who was found work at Malden, which was located in West Virginia. Okay, so they started living and working at Malden, and working especially in the salt mines. So where again our writer Booker was also put on the work packing salt. So he was never given a chance, a freedom of enjoying or a freedom of childhood, especially, right? He was asked to do work as a slave in the Burroughs farm, and at the same time in the mines of salt. So where he worked as a worker packing salt, right? So then between the ages of 10 and 12, he worked in a coal mine. So he shifted from salt mines to coal mines. So where he found independently his work, and where he started attending school while working in the coal mines. So it is a good starting in his life, we can understand, because a slave does not have a place to sleep, a food to eat, a cloth to wear, but the days were changed and the independence has come and gave them a chance to uh, secure a formal education. But his economical conditions were not allowed him to just attend only schooling. That's why he attended school and the other side worked in a coal mine in order to balance his family condition and economical conditions. And his interest towards education made him today a great person, right? A great personality, an inspiring personality. So we can see there are many other incidents are going to inspire us to know through the life of this writer. Okay, so you can see at the beginning of his life, in the first 9 years, he worked as a slave on the Burroughs farm. So a slave's life, you can imagine in our India, a life of untouchable people and a life of the people who lend their services freely, which is called bonded labor. In Telugu, vetti chakari. సో వెట్టి చాకరీ చేసే వాళ్ళ యొక్క జీవితాన్ని మనము ఈ స్లేవరీ వాళ్ళ జీవితంతో మనం పోల్చుకోవచ్చు. సో యూ కెన్ ఇమాజిన్ అండ్ కంపేర్ అండ్ ద లైఫ్స్ ఆఫ్ స్లేవ్స్ ఇన్ ఆఫ్రికా అండర్ ద domination of white people, and in our India the life of subaltern people under the domination of upper caste people. So here India facing the problem of casteism, and the other countries were facing the problem of racism and colorism. Okay, so we can learn many things through his life. Okay, so and finally, the good days started for him to learn education while working in other sectors. So in 1871, he went to work as a houseboy. So he shifting from difficult places to smoother places through his education, right? So working in farm is also very difficult, and working in salt mines and working in coal mines, which is very difficult to lead life, especially being a child labor. So you imagine that. Okay, but now he got some smoother work into a house, so he went to work as a houseboy for the wife of John Lewis Ruffner, owner of the mines. So he got some journey towards a smoother life. Okay, so you can see, imagine that. So then we'll see some more important aspects. So up to that, so now he was at the age of 16. So in 1872, Booker T. Washington entered Hampton Normal and Agriculture Institute in Virginia. Do you know what is his entrance test to enter into this institution? We all of know entrance test means which will be conducted by in the form of written examination, or it can be oral examination. But here we cannot expect the examination to admit into that institution to Booker T. Washington. It was you can see his entrance examination to Hampton was to clean a room. He has to clean the room in order to get into the admission. The another important fact you can also see, to admit into the college or Hampton Normal Agriculture Institute, where he was living at Malden, right? So from there he walked to this institution. So Washington traveled most of the distance from Malden to Hampton on foot, arriving penniless, without a rupee in his pocket. He was on foot completely from the place Malden to Hampton. And when he was reached to the institution where he was asked to clean a room to test his skill. And after the room was cleaned, the teacher inspected his work with a spotless white handkerchief. Imagine that. Okay. So he he qualified in that examination and he got opportunity to admit into that institution. Okay, and he admitted, but there to continue his education he must require the financial support. So for that he was given work as a janitor to pay the cost of his room and board. Janitor means here you can see a caretaker of a building or a caretaker of a school who cleans the classrooms and other areas of the school, and he also repairs the if are there any. So he has taken as a worker in that particular school in order to pay his cost of his room and board. And at the same time, Armstrong was a principal of Hampton Normal Agricultural Institute who arranged a white benefactor to pay his tuition. So in these critical situations, he continued his education, okay, where he worked the other side working and the other and continuing his education. Okay, so you can see how much humiliation also hidden in that perspective. But his economical conditions never become an abstract to him to continue his education. But he overcome all the problems and continued his education and bearing all the humiliation and difficulties and hard work. Okay, so at Hampton, Washington studied academic subjects. Okay, and at the same time, he worked in the agriculture fields and fixed days. So you can imagine how difficult it is for a student to work in agriculture fields and at the same time engaging in his studies. And here fixed days, you can say fixed days, it is like a poultry for hen. In the same way, it is a place for pigs to stay. So where he has to work in this agriculture fields as well as fixed days. So you can imagine how it is difficult and how dirty place this fixed days. He has to clean all those things, all those areas in order to continue his education. So here actually they never bothered about where I was working, but they thought themselves we were learning education, we were practically learning and experiencing the knowledge. So their education is completely on experience based, not on the theoretical based. There are theoretical based, at the same time they would have experienced, okay, practically also. So their education is like that. So that's why they never bothered to clean a classroom. Even cleaning a classroom, they felt it is a duty. It is an examination, but they never felt it. But today's education is completely different when we compare to the older education to the present education. Okay, there are many other things associated with today's education. Okay, now he also learned lessons in personal cleanliness. Yeah, so this is personal cleanliness. So this personal cleanliness is also important, that consider as a lesson, and good manners. So behavior is also very important. This sincerity and what we call the dignitary and even the punctuality is very important. A student, if he does not have that, what is the use of gaining the knowledge of subjects if he does not have sincerity and good manners and the good character? Okay, so that's why the thought personal cleanliness and good manners as a subject for them. Okay, he's our author Booker T. Washington is was a very specialist has person in public speaking and debate. He has very much interest towards public speaking and debate. If he speaks, everyone listens and everyone lends their ears to him. And that much of attraction he has to speak and passion to speak. Okay? But today, students are not well trained in personal cleanliness and good manners, and they are polluted. They are polluted, and just they are not going to strongly focusing on their personal education and academic education. Okay, I don't know what was the wrong with the system of education, but it has to be learned through personally, and it is our personal responsibility to improve our personality. Okay, and then okay, let us try to know the institution which was established by Booker T. Washington. What is the institution name? Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, which was established for black people specifically. Okay, so how the idea to establish a school for black people was raised? It was the idea of two persons. In the year 1880, Lewis Adams, a former slave, and George W. Campbell, a former slave owner. These two persons generated an idea of establishing a school for blacks in Macon County. Okay, so for this idea, the people like our author and his principal brought a good structure to this institution, and today it has turned as a university, Tuskegee University, one of the famous universities in African American institutions. Okay, so when they decided, and it was approved by the government, and after the approval got to this institution, the people asked or invited Armstrong to recommend a white teacher as principal of the school. But Armstrong suggested, instead of a white teacher, Washington, our author. He suggested our author as the principal of this institution. Okay, so Washington and Armstrong and other committee, the selection committee, approved Washington as the principal of this institution, who accepted. So when Washington arrived at Tuskegee, he found that no land or buildings had been acquired for the projected school. There were no any land and buildings, nor was there any money for these purposes. Even there is no money to construct to buy the land and building, to construct the buildings. Only since the appropriation was for salaries only. This was the critical situation. In that critical situation, Washington has taken up this project to start a school for black people in order to develop their character, in order to improve their life from the system of slavery to a freedom of life. Okay, so he felt education is only the tool to change the life of the people. So that's why he took many struggles to develop the school. Okay, so what were they? We'll look at this. Okay, so finally the school was opened on July 4 in 1881. So for that purpose, Washington has borrowed money from Hampton Institute's treasurer, and he purchased an abandoned 100-acre plantation on the outskirts of Tuskegee. And this is one project, one step towards the development of this school. So where students were admitted, but you see here, the first task to the students was to build a kiln. Kiln, it's a thing where they burn the bricks to get it hard. ఓకే సో మనం తెలుగులో దీన్ని కొల్మి అంటాము. అంటే ఇటుకల్ని మనం మట్టితో తయారు చేసి దాన్ని కాల్వడానికి ఉపయోగించే ఒక ప్లేస్ని కిల్ అంటారు. సో అక్కడ సో స్టూడెంట్స్ వర్ ఇన్స్ట్రక్టెడ్ ఫస్ట్ టు బిల్డ్ అ కిల్, అండ్ విత్ దట్ the students made bricks for their buildings, and at the same time the same bricks were sold to raise money. Can you imagine? Being a student, what is his purpose? He has to study. But here what happened? Here they admitted and working for the construction of their buildings, for their classrooms. And at the same time, they also worked to raise money in order to facilitate their basic needs of education. So within a few years, they built a classroom building, a dining hall, a girls' dormitory, and a chapel. What is the meaning of chapel? Chapel means a place where you can pray, a religious place. It's like a church. Okay? So the students, within a few years, they worked there and raised money and constructed their own classrooms and dining halls. Here you can think, student is the main treasurer to any institution. If students are not there, no institution will be existed. So that's why student must think it is my home. And you should not think from the perspective of what institution is going to give to me, but student must think what I am going to give to the institution. Then the student can develop himself, at the same time his development will give the development to the institution. But student must be trained in that perspective only. But today's education is not just trying to mold the students as takers only, but not givers. And we are training the students for the purpose of job only. But here the institution, here this Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institution, which was trained the students for the benefit of institution, at the same time for the benefit of the student also. He developed in his skills as well as in his career. And that kind of attitude and that kind of environment has to be developed in every institution. Then more beyond our expected outcomes will come through the education system. Okay, let us see one more thing. So by 1888, the 540-acre Tuskegee Normal Industrial Institute had enrolled of more than 400 students. You see that. It was started with 100 of acres and it is enhanced to 540 acres. And today this Tuskegee University is in 2,000 acres of land. And how many students enrolled? 400, more than 400 students were enrolled. And what kind of education they are giving through that education, through that industrial institute? They are offering training in such skilled trades as carpentry, cabinet net, and homemaking, and printing, shoemaking, and tinsmithing. Boys also studied farming and dairying, while girls learned such domestic skills as cooking and sewing. So not only the formal education, along with that the skill trades also trained them in that institution. So the student can live anywhere with his skills which were trained in the education. That is very important. Not only the theoretical knowledge, but the practical knowledge gives more experience to the student, and that is very, very important to emphasize. in every education institution, not only the old days, but today also. It is mostly it is today we require the practical knowledge for the students. Okay, so through their own labor, students supplied a large part of the needs of the school. See that, okay, through their own labor. So they worked there in the institution, and whatever their work, the outcome helped to the needs of the school, which were fulfilled itself by the students itself. So students supplied a large part of the needs of the school. In the academic departments, and Washington insisted that the efforts be made to relate the subject matter to the actual experiences of the students. So this actual experiences of the students is emphasized in every department in that institution. So not only the theoretical experiences. So strong emphasis was placed on personal hygiene and manners and character building. So these three things are very important personally for every student. If he does not have this personal hygiene and manners and good manners and character, what is the use of learning the subject if he does not function properly? So that is the thing. So it is very, very important of every institution. It has to inbuild the personal hygiene and manners and character building. And it is not only the institutional responsibility, but is the personally every student's responsibility to develop himself, his personality. That is very important. He has to focus on that along with the subject learning. Okay, so and one more point, students followed a rigid schedule of study and work, arising at 5 in the morning and retiring at 9:30 at night. You can see that how much restricted to their timetable, how interesting they are working towards their timetable. So this much of dedication and interest is very important. It has to be come from his heart, of the student's heart, and then only the student will be shined, and he'll have a bright future. So if such kind of dedication is not there, and then the student is not going to improve his skills. Okay, so this is the point I would like to mention through the life of our Dr. Booker T. Washington. So the final point I would like to let you know that how the students of this institution, Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, helped to the development of institution. And the same way, the present student should help the institution to develop itself. And that help is nothing but your personal development. So think as a giver, but not a taker. So enjoy the happiness of giving, but please do not limit to the happiness of taking. Okay, so education must be develop the character of giving, but not just taking. Okay, that is very important, and motivate yourself and try to grow as a giver of the institution, but not a taker of the institution. An institution has to proud being on your achievement, and that kind of qualities you have to develop. Okay, it is because of today we are discussing about their students, because it's their achievement. It is because of their hard work. It is because of their dedication towards their institution and love and affection towards their institution. Today it reached to the position of one of the famous universities in US for black people. So you also work towards your institution and towards your career development. Okay, thank you one and all for listening. We'll meet into the next session on prose text. Thank you all.